had different enactments of the laws, which include various laws, which include the National Land Commission Act of 2012, as well as the Land Registration Act of 2012. But however, according to a 2021 briefing paper by the Kenya Land Alliance, an organization that works to improve land laws in Kenya, women hold only, get this, 1% of all land titles in their names and 5 to 6% jointly. So ahead of the International Women's Day this Saturday, we ask, what steps do you think should be taken to ensure equal inheritance rights for women? Talk to us on our socials. 0795 is our number to call in live. 22047 is our SMS number, at TV47KE on Facebook. A couple of comments, we'll be taking a look at that. But to help us have this conversation, Eliud Ngugi, a lawyer, karibu sana. First of all, what will be your interpretation of, how will you describe the word inheritance when it comes to the corridors of law?
Well, inheritance is a process by which there is transfer of property from the dead to the living. So upon demise or upon death of a person, who comes and steps into the shoes of this person? So that's a process of inheritance and succession. That's how we define it. Somebody has to come and step in, either to transfer on behalf of the person who has died, or someone has to step in and also acquire this property on behalf of the person. And continue managing or continue owning.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is a quite a sticky conversation that I know you'd really be helping us deduce to very easy bits so that people can really understand. Because I mean, traditionally there's a whole culture as well as the law kind of backlash. But help us understand what the background of how things have been changing over the years and how the law has been changing when it comes to matrimonial property and everything.
Well, for succession and for matrimonial property, initially we had laws pre our constitution, around the constitution, our independence season, that is 1963. So we had Married Women Property Act, which was established way before or had already been acquired from our colonizers, and we came to take that law where it was meant to ensure that there was equal or there was transfer of matrimonial property. And so through the process, until 2013, when we now came up with the new Matrimonial Property Act, we only relied on court decisions when it came to matrimonial property. So we had cases in court that determines whether when it comes to death and when it comes to matrimonial property, the inheritance is 50-50, or it was less than that percentage.
Right.
But besides the matrimonial property, which is a totally different conversation, there was a succession law, which is a 1960s act, which to date, we are still using it. Actually, it's a 1980 act. We're still using it on succession process. And so it has its definition. And for so long, we have relied on that act until when we got the Constitution of 2010, which came to define and bring equality issues when it comes to inheritance, especially where women are involved. For so long, women and culture there was so much discrimination because the culture was probably considered higher than what the law was. And so you would find that women would not be able to purchase property because there was nothing to back it. There was no information about ownership of property until now, 2010, where the rights to property have come to be established. And with the Constitution also, we got the land laws, 3 land laws, which are very clear that one cannot even sell land without seeking consent of their partner or their spouse. So it's been a journey in Kenya, and it's been a process. And thanks to the new laws, we are now able to make sure that there is no discrimination. And I would like to even quote Article 27, which establishes that there should be no discrimination on ground of gender. That article in the Constitution actually has uplifted and held the issue to do with equality very high.
And because you've begun by mentioning articles, I'll also mention a couple of articles that I have. And just to take a look at what the law says, even for the benefit of the viewer to understand. So this is what the law says, and we'll now get into the ambiguity of the law. Is the law actually really clear when it comes to different bits of it? So first off, so Article 60, Cap F of the Constitution of Kenya calls for non-discrimination between genders in land ownership. And then, so I had this quite an interesting, it was quite a long one. It's a quote by Justice Anthony Mrima. And he was delivering a particular judgment last year, around May. And so according to him, he says, I'm in an agreement that time has now come for those discriminative cultural practices against women to be buried in history. We'll be getting to understand the whole backlash between culture as well as the law. So this is last year, and just understanding, is it too late so far? There's another one, the Law of Succession Act, that provides that children born following extramarital affairs are heirs of their biological fathers, and this was quite the conversation last year as well. So that's just in a nutshell what the law says. Let's take a look at how the numbers are looking like. And we'll be basing this on data by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, as the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey of 2022. So first off, it says 7 in 10 Kenyan women who own property do not have a title deed. And as well as, so also, according to the survey, 1/5 of Kenyan women own agricultural land. Meanwhile, only 3% of these women own land of their own, while 20% own land jointly with a spouse or partner. And finally, according to this survey released last year, the 2022 survey reveals that of the women who owned land, divorced and separated women were 10.0%, widows were 48.6%, while married formed 39.4%. Now you are in the know when it comes to matters law and how the numbers are looking like. So first off, I want us to reduce this data, the law and also the numbers, into very minute pieces for the viewer to understand, okay, so this is what it looks like. So first off, the ambiguity of the law. You had quoted the Article 27, so this is Article 60, really touching on non-discrimination. It's also what Justice Anthony Mrima, quoted. But do you feel at some point the law is quite ambiguous in its interpretation when it comes to how the inheritance should be, and particularly for between men and women?
No, the law is not ambiguous. The law is, like we like saying, it's very clear. And I would take you to Article 40 on the right to property, which provides that every person has the right, either individually or association with others, to own property of whatever size and anywhere in this country. So every person, whether you're male or female, it covers you. When I take you back to Article 27, which says equality includes, or every person is equal before the law and has a right to equal protection and equal benefit. And there's also another provision under the same article that women and men have the right to equal treatment, including, this is Article 27(3). Women and men have the right, it even starts with women, have the right to equal treatment, including the right to equal opportunities in political, economic, cultural, and social spheres. And so, when it comes to the law, starting with that supreme law of this country, which is the Constitution, it is very clear, there is equality. Then when we go to the succession law, when we look at the Succession Act, Article 3(5) defines who is a wife. And it's either a wife or wives. Then goes back to there's a section 29 which gives an order of people who should inherit. And in the definition of who should inherit, we have either wives, former wives, and then children come in.
So it basically breaks it down.
It breaks it down.
But then now, why do we have quite the increasing cases of land tussles in different parts of the country, in different communities? You find this community, this family says, our dad, the husband, passed away, and the elder brothers don't really want, these sisters to own this land. Why are we still having, at this day and age, as much as the law is clear?
So there are two types of succession. So you could either die testate or intestate. When you die testate, it means you have planned for your inheritance by coming up with a document called a will. So you have noted down all your properties, you have noted down all the beneficiaries, and it is very clear and it has been witnessed by the right people who are supposed to see through the transfer of these properties.
All right.
But when it comes to the other type of succession, people also die without planning themselves, and we call it intestate. So when you die intestate, it's where you don't have a will and people rush to court because we have a succession act that assists people who die without having a will.
Right.
That's why we have so many succession cases, we have so many battles, because Kenyans are afraid of planning for their exit or their absence here on earth. And so they feel their fear, there's a phobia, I think, to write a will, for example, or to even start transferring your properties while you're still alive. And especially in Mount Kenya, you find many people would not transfer their properties to their children and they die intestate. And so the children will come in and there will be inequality, because if the family had more sons, they feel that the culture empowers them to actually own everything and leave out the women. And that's why we have all these court cases that we see in court.
All right.
Yeah.
And just a reminder, you can always be part of this conversation, 0795 045 864. Tafuta credit size, always say, utupigie simu. Wakili is here, you can throw in all those questions in case you have any experience, or you're actually in that process of, getting into matters inheritance right now. Talk to us and, tell us, how has that experience been for you? And what steps do you think should be taken to ensure equal inheritance rights for women? We'll be sampling some of the feedback that you'll be sharing on our Facebook page at TV47KE, as well as our X page on TV47 News. So, Wakili, we've deduced, the background of it. Now, to just understand how different scenarios would really be playing out here. Because last year we had the whole ruling of, children born out of extramarital affairs and how that plays along. Can they enlighten us on how now that is? Because there is that, and then because as you say, the law also states that it gives the definition of, so there's wives, former wives. How does this scenario play out when it comes to matters inheritance?
So under the Succession Act, that section 29 provides after wives, former wives, there's a provision for children. We call it in general the order of consanguinity. This is the order by which, when it comes to inheritance, who should be given preference over who. And when it comes to the definition of who is a child, it gives a definition that a child is either one born in that family or one who was being supported. So a child of a deceased or one who was being provided for. So if the person had adopted or was a guardian to a child, then the person can come and seek to be provided for in that estate. But secondly, a child, again, if they have a DNA, whether they are known to the family or not, then they come in and claim their right. And that's why we have seen even there's a major matter in court right now of one of the former presidents of this country, where someone has come out saying that they are a child to the former president. And they are seeking for exhumation rights because they want the DNA and all this other confirmation to show that they're actually children, or they're actually seeking for the DNA to prove that they are the children of this family. And they have tried having an out-of-court settlement, which backfired, I think, a week ago, and now they are back in court. So a child is any person born in that family, and they have a right to inheritance.
So originally, the court will have to ask for a DNA test.
You have to prove. If you are unknown to the family, then you see the family will try and fight you. And the only way you can prove that you're a child to the person who has passed on is by seeking for an order for a DNA test. And if the people who are around are not willing to give their samples, then exhumation orders are applied for to have the DNA test done. And so that's that one for children. But when it comes to wives and a wife, we've been a conversation and debate because the matrimonial law provides that property owned under Article 45 and under the Matrimonial Property Act of Kenya of 2013, property owned at the beginning, during, and after death, at the end of a marriage, belongs to the parties equally when they are together. And so if it's at the beginning, when you're getting into the marriage, during the marriage, and you obtain properties, then at the end, so if you have separated and you have not concluded your divorce proceedings, then the person can come and claim for this property. What happens if this person also passes on and you are just separated? So you become a former wife. Or sometimes you have made your contribution in the course of this marriage and you end up divorcing, then the person passes on. You are defined as a former wife. So in this situation, when the succession process comes in, the former wife comes in and makes their claim and say that in 1980, for example, in 1990, when we were together and married, the property in Eldoret was purchased by myself. I contributed, and they make a claim for that property. So during the succession proceedings, that former wife is able to come in and make a claim for that land. Yeah.
Right. Still on the whole Succession Act, and so I want you to help us understand what life interest means on this. And this is based on the 29th of September, 2022, Meru High Court declared the provision on the Law Succession Act that states that a widow loses the life interest in the event of remarriage. Further stating that the Succession Act must be interpreted in a manner that gives effect to equality of women and men with regard to protections and benefits. So now before this ruling, the widow could not accrue the whole, rather benefit from the whole life interest. Explain to us what this really means.
Life interest is where you have left a part of your life. And you have already separated and you want to claim, but because you are still together, then you can make a claim for that period of time you are still alive.
Okay. And
so life interest is basically that, and so the court was able to define that and give a direction.
So before that, even for widows, they could not, if they decided to remarry, they were not able to benefit from any inheritance, or what did it really mean?
We were not able to benefit from it, and I've actually had an experience with one of these. I got a ruling in a case I was doing last year,
right? And
the person had claimed that they had already been remarried, and therefore they had no claim on this property. And the court went ahead to agree that they actually did have a right to the property because they were able to show that this property was purchased in the course of the marriage. Yeah.
So now, because so this is 2022, and when we started, we saw that some of these enactments were done. We had the whole 2012, some of these laws, and now again for the whole 2013. But it seems as if we are learning day by day when it comes to some of these provisions and even the judgments made by the courts. Now for culture and also law? Because how does that now clash?
Culture, traditions. There are some traditions which are still, for lack of a better word, archaic, or there is no equality when it comes to women. This religion that also plays a huge part when it comes to property ownership in Kenya. One of them is the Islamic law. It has a way it deals. And in Kenya, when it comes to property law, we say that the Islamic law shall apply, and we leave it to them. So there's a play around religion. And when it comes to culture, there are cultures which do not esteem this equality conversation and do not allow, for example, women to own property. But when we look at the order, or when we look at preference and treatment of the law is taken higher, or is given a preference over the culture. And so if the law provides that there is equality, and the culture says there should be inequality, the person can come to court. But when they have no such information, then there's some conflict in play. And so the law is esteemed higher, is more supreme compared to the cultural practices of this country. And sometimes we consider, you hear the judges considering some cultural practices, sometimes even inviting elders, sometimes even going through the journals if the culture is captured in books, to look at how are people treated in that culture versus how the law is. And one of the conversation I would like to bring to you, or one of the cases I would like to share with you, was the difference between, for example, the death rights. And you remember in early 90, I think it was 1993, the case of SM Otieno versus Wamboi, where Wamboi was seeking to have a body buried in their matrimonial home against the cultural practices of the Luo culture.
Yeah.
And the court then agreed with the culture and allowed the body of SM not to be buried in Ngong, Matasi, or someplace, but to be buried in upcountry. And then later on, last year, there was a case, there was a ruling by the Court of Appeal that involved the Gusii culture. And this Gusii culture, the case was on burial rights again. The cultural issues that when you have built a house with 2 doors, the culture assumes that if you have a home that has 2 doors, the one door is for entry and the exit, there's one for exit to take you to the burial site. And so these brothers were claiming and had fought over the rights to bury their brother, and they were claiming that because of the culture, he was supposed to be buried somewhere in Kisii and not in the lady's piece of land in Kamulu. And the court, looking at the law, saw that it was right for the woman to bury the husband in their matrimonial home in Kamulu, because even against the culture, etc., the wife is the one who is given more preference, or who had spent most of the time and therefore knew what would be the best interest of this particular man who had passed on.
Okay.
Where would he have wanted to be buried? And that's why, again, the succession law also provides for the burial procedures. Even when it comes to writing a will, people give their preferences and state where they want to be or how they want to be buried.
So because I mean, you say because in the initial bit you said the village elders and community elders were involved, in
the court case.
In the court case, but then how much of the advice is really taken by the court?
A lot of it. The court will listen to the elders, will listen to the clansmen, because the court also wants to make a decision from a point of information and listen to what the cultural practices are like before making a determination, to make sure that they uphold the law from a point of information. Yeah.
Right. Now, over the years, we've seen women jointly own, property and also land. When it comes to really even deter the whole, because we're seeing even the numbers that we're taking a look at, a majority of men have the property and have the land. But then now we're seeing a whole trend of now women starting up to jointly own some of this land, so that maybe even in future generations they also have this assets, so that they can also now inherit for women coming along the whole generation. Do you think this is the way to go, or it's just a band-aid?
Because of what the law provides, that everyone in this country has a right to own property, no matter your gender, no matter the area, no matter the size of this land. When women come together, it's the same way when men have come together before and bought pieces of land. It's a right way and direction to go about property. There's nothing that hinders women from coming together and owning property and doing as they wish with that property, because they are Kenyans who should enjoy their rights to property. Yeah. All
right. Because again, you really mentioned how much the whole equality for them, and you are really saying that even for women they should really be, because the Constitution says. But then mostly husbands will hold powers when it comes to in the marriage and how things are done, really, and this becomes even futile for the wife to get a name on the property. So how should we really change this in this new generation of how the Gen Zs and the millennials are getting married and all that?
One, even if you are to own land as a woman in your own name, or the husband insists and says that title has to be in my name, I know you have contributed, but because I'm the man of the house, the title should be in my name. You should not be afraid, because my reference earlier to the Matrimonial Property Act and to Article 45 on equality, when it comes to property, it provides that property owned at the beginning and during belongs to the parties in a marriage equally. And so, if one takes or buys land and puts their own name, and it's in the course of a marriage, then it is presumed under the law that you're holding a share of your spouse in that land equally. But then the conversation on how did you contribute, how much did you contribute comes in. And they will come in and allege that I did an indirect contribution. A direct contribution, for example, I took a loan. There's a direct contribution. But then there's also an indirect distribution where they may have saved your time by engaging in other activities to help you. For example, cleaning after you, or taking care of your children, or running the family business, where you are also meant to be spending. So the time value that they invested in that in your life counts as an indirect contribution when it comes to this property that is purchased during the course of your marriage. And so no one should be worried when their husband or their spouse insists on this document having their name. But you should also keep your records, because how then will you prove that this property belongs to you or you contributed to this property? So you might find yourself maybe transferring, sending M-Pesa to this spouse of yours to clear some installments. Keep those records, because you need to use these records later on when it comes to the dispute around this property to claim your share. Even though your name does not appear, you could use those records to claim your share. Yeah.
You mentioned about the whole time value. So how does the court ascertain that? So this is the time that they spent, maybe for 1 year, and this is how much and what actually happened in that 1 year. How does the court really ascertain that?
It's a question of marriage. You are married, and now it's even important to mention that there is nothing like what do you call these marriages, where can we stay marriages in our laws? There's a requirement under the Marriage Act for one to register your marriage. Under Section 45 of the Marriage Act, you need to register your marriage. And all you need to do, if you're in a come and stay, or you did a traditional wedding, you paid dowry, or dowry was paid for you, you need to ask your man to make sure that you get a certificate, you register that marriage. Because then, when it comes to this dispute about property and you're asking about the time value, how do you prove it? One, you need to prove that you're in a marriage. It will happen, this property was purchased in the course of your marriage. And secondly, there are 5 things that you could prove that you indirectly contributed that amount to the time. One, maybe you are running a business together. And so your time spent in the business and as a co-partner or as an employee of a business, a supervisor of that hardware shop or that shop that you own together was also your contribution when it comes to the property. If you are in farming activities, agriculture, and you are involved in farming, that counts as time value. If you are doing domestic work in that house, taking care of the children, washing dishes, cooking for this man, ironing his clothes, it counts. That's a time value. Then if you are providing that, that warmth and just companionship, it counts for time value. And so that's how you are able to prove the time value that you contributed, and that is what in our Matrimonial Property Act, that's what is defined as indirect contribution. Yes.
Right. And even as we come to the whole closing of this kind of conversation, I want to take you back to the whole bit when you started, according to 2021 briefing paper by the Kenya Land Alliance, that says women hold only 1% of all land titles in their names. So that's about, that's 1%. And so this is in a juxtaposition of, so this is 2021, but then we're taking a look at enactments that were done back in 2012, 2013. You know, it has taken years and on end when we're having the whole, patriarchy system really having, fought and have a whole strong and iron fist on this bit. But then, do you foresee a situation where the next maybe, let's say 5-10 years, some of these numbers might be changing because of these laws? And does it now stop on the laws, or is it now on people understanding that this should actually be the case?
I like what TV47 is doing today by having this conversation, and it is part of a contribution to civic education. You find that a lot of people don't have this information or knowledge that they can, like, if you're a woman, that you can own property, that you have a right to say no to the sale or transfer of any property in your family, that when your husband is about to borrow money or to take a facility, take a mortgage, you have a right to know and to sign off that, and you need to be informed of what is happening. Not just being given papers in the evening and you're told, weka sahihi hapa. You need to have that information. And I foresee, because TV47 is offering this information, and we are going to keep on having this conversation, that more and more people are going to understand that they have their rights. They have equal rights to property. They have equal rights to even home ownership. But they are going to engage in this, in this, and get more properties, get to even seek to have their names on these documents, not just the husband pushing it.
But then what's the role of the authority itself? The lands authority, when it comes to even the husband has gone to nimenunua shamba mahali along Thika Road, wenda kwa lands authority, and they have the papers, and then now back at home is where now they engage the wife as an afterthought. But then should the authority have both parties ask, are you married? Yes. Now can we have both man and wife on this, and actually is this consensual? Yes. Let's now sign this. How does it work when they actually sign these papers?
Under the land laws, there's a requirement to have the spousal consent. And this requirement provides that your spouse needs to confirm that they're aware that you are selling property, one. Number two, that you are not coerced in giving this consent for the transfer of this property.
Because now I was going there, because
Yes.
now by signature,
Yeah.
it can be a coercion of the same.
So you swear an affidavit, and you state that you are not coerced. Then you find some registries and some land registrars even requiring that you bring a copy of the ID. We want to see who is this spouse, because you've said so and so is your spouse.
Yeah.
And so they come in and they give you that, they make that request and demand that you have to do it. Even when you're doing your subdivisions, you're required to go for the land board consent, which also the land board in that district, in that sub-county now currently, will require that you show up with your wife when you come to appear before the land board, and you intend to either transfer agricultural land or you intend to either subdivide it. This board under the law is now requesting that you bring your spouse, and your spouse should be able to confirm. So you are appearing before a body and you are able to confirm that, yes, I'm aware, we are selling this land, we have agreed to sell this land, or we have agreed to subdivide this land because of 1, 2, 3 reasons. So there's that requirement under the law. But also if you're a woman and you're a wife and you learn that your husband went ahead and did all these things without your knowledge, you have a right to rush to court and do what we call registration of caveats. Go to the land registry in a local, in a simpler term. I hear people say that funga shamba. So you can go to and request to see the registrar, and the registrar is able to help you stop any transfer or dealing with this land where you actually feel or you understand that it is going through either transfer or subdivision without your knowledge or your consent. Because also you need to protect your children, so that, well, you don't know what will happen in the future. You need to protect your children so that they have an inheritance when it comes to property.
Right.
Yeah.
This Saturday, Wakili, is International Women's Day. Your advice to women when it comes to this conversation, the rights when it comes to property and also inheritance, briefly.
Well, women need to understand and to utilize and to enjoy their rights to property. One, they have a right to equal treatment under the law. They have a right to own property under the law, and they have a right to even be consulted when it comes to either subdivision or disposal of land. And they should be able to exercise that right with confidence, without fear of anything, without being afraid of backlash, without even being afraid of a culture. Because as a woman, when it comes to also succession, you have a right to equality. So if you are 3 siblings and you are the only girl, the rest are boys, and you have an acre of land, you have a right to get 1/3 of that land, and you should enjoy that land.
Right.
So if it's International Women's Day, women should enjoy and celebrate their rights.
Right. Asante sana Eliud Ngugi, a lawyer, when it matters discussion of women's rights and property and inheritance. Kama kawaida, this conversation continues online. Real quick, before we take a short break and move on to the next conversation, Dr. Anthony Kemei says, so they should inherit from both sides, from husband and home. This thing has made women not to be married. Quite a number of gentlemen discussing this. And Nugola says, if she's married, there's nothing as equal. Ofula Isaac is quite ranting. What steps do you think should be taken to ensure equal treatment rights on our gender desks for men? Amesema Boychela amesahaulika. And finally, squeeze hata mali ya kuinherit hakuna. That is according to Logi pale Facebook. Keep talking to us on our socials. What steps do you think should be done to ensure equal rights when it comes to matters, equal inheritance rights for women?